On July 4, 1956, in New Jersey, USA, 1-month-old Peter Weinberger disappeared from his family's home in an incident that shocked everyone. It was a night full of celebrations as people enjoyed Independence Day festivities. But for the Weinberger family, the joyful atmosphere quickly turned into chaos and terror. Initially, no one believed that the child had been kidnapped. The parents thought he might be sleeping in another room. However, as time passed, the nightmare unfolded before them, and they began to realize the bitter truth. Peter had been abducted. After several hours of searching the house and the surrounding areas, there was still no trace of the child. At that point, the parents decided to contact the police, initiating a formal investigation into the incident. Local law enforcement mobilized to search for the kidnapped child, and as time went on, the family began to comprehend the scale of the disaster. This was no mere accident. The kidnapping was a serious case that required collective effort. A state of emergency was declared, and investigators were assigned to search for any clues that might help unravel the mystery of Peter's disappearance. Search teams began scouring the nearby neighborhoods and rural areas of New Jersey looking for any trace of the child. Families in the area were anxious, and everyone was on edge, watching every sound and movement. The police examined homes and businesses, searching for anything that could aid the investigation. Those early days were crucial, as everyone had high hopes of finding Peter quickly. However, everything seemed unclear, and no substantial evidence was found. As local and international pressures grew, with the media and public demanding answers, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, decided to intervene in the case. In the following days, a specialized FBI team arrived in New Jersey and began reevaluating the evidence, directing the investigation down new paths. This marked a turning point in the case, with everyone hoping the federal authorities could find a lead that would take them closer to the child. As public interest in the case grew, the police decided to release images of Peter Weinberger to both local and international media. The images showed the child in his early stages of development, which struck a chord with many people. Posters were distributed in streets and shops, and anyone with information was urged to contact the police immediately. There was great hope that this campaign would help bring in vital information that could lead to finding Peter. To incentivize individuals who might have crucial information, the family, in collaboration with the local community, organized a fundraising campaign. A substantial reward was offered for anyone who provided evidence that helped solve the case. This campaign was driven by both desperation and hope, the hope of finding Peter and the despair of waiting with no progress. The reward was announced in newspapers and on television, causing the case to gain much wider attention. As time passed, false leads began to emerge, with people claiming to have witnessed something that could help the case. These pieces of evidence, however, were inconclusive, and at times, they caused confusion among investigators. Often, the investigators followed these leads only to discover they were misguiding them from the right track. These moments of deception created tension within the investigation team, leaving everyone doubtful and fearful that the true opportunity to find Peter might slip away. With limited evidence, the FBI began to monitor several suspected individuals. This period was filled with deep investigations, where the authorities focused on anyone who had visited the Weinberger family in the days leading up to the kidnapping. The investigators examined the relationships of these individuals with the family and explored whether they had hidden motives. However, no concrete evidence linked any of them to the crime, leaving the investigation stagnant and raising questions about the potential culprit. After closely monitoring the suspects, the investigators decided to go back and re-examine surveillance camera footage from the area. There was hope that one of the cameras might have captured something that could lead them to solve the case. Unfortunately, the footage provided no useful information. The images were either unclear or the angles weren't ideal to capture the critical details. It was frustrating, but the investigation continued, holding on to the hope that new clues would emerge. The investigation then shifted to former criminals who had recently been released from prison. There was a belief that one of them might have been involved in Peter's kidnapping. Their criminal records were carefully examined, and interviews were conducted to see if any of them had connections to the incident. However, it was found that most of these individuals had no involvement with the crime. This period proved confusing for the investigators, as they felt the list of potential suspects was growing unexpectedly. With no significant evidence found around the family's home, the search expanded to rural and remote areas. These regions included forests and uninhabited lands, which could be ideal hiding spots. However, searching here wasn't easy. The terrain was challenging and distant, adding complexity to the operation. There were moments of hope when teams found traces that seemed to suggest something, but those hopes quickly faded with every step they took. On September 22, 1956, away from the noise of the investigation, one of the search team members discovered some items belonging to Peter in a remote forest. These clues offered a new glimmer of hope. The police began to follow the trail carefully, leading them to believe the kidnapper may have hidden in that area. Although the discovery wasn't fully conclusive, it gave everyone renewed hope that the investigation might finally make progress. On September 22, 1956, shock awaited everyone. Peter Weinberger's body was discovered in a nearby forest. The body had begun to decompose, making identification difficult. However, it was confirmed through the clothes Peter had been wearing. The news was devastating. Peter was no longer alive, and all the efforts to bring him home had failed. This was one of the darkest moments the Weinberger family had ever experienced. After the discovery of the body, the FBI officially announced Peter Weinberger's death. The family had completely lost hope of finding their child, and for them, this was the tragic and unbelievable ending to the nightmare that began that fateful July day in 1956. This announcement was the final closure to the wound that had started that dreadful day. Despite the investigation's failure to identify the perpetrator, the crime left its mark in history. Despite the ongoing investigation and the great efforts made by the FBI, the case was closed in 1957 without identifying the perpetrator. It remains one of the most mysterious cases in New Jersey's history, as investigators couldn't find concrete evidence to link anyone to the crime. The case of Peter Weinberger remains one of the most tragic unsolved stories, raising questions about what really happened on that sorrowful night. Source of the original story. Date: Peter Weinberger was kidnapped on July 4, 1956, and the case was closed in 1957. Country: United States of America, New Jersey.